All right, so on Friday, I had a few terms. Okay, as we're entering the war, well, Russia's leaving. So I know I just went over the terms on Friday just because there's so many of them, and I just real quick want to review that first part of the vocab, and we'll move on and talk about the Russian Revolution and how this war is going to get a little interesting before it ends. Okay. Like I said, we are finishing up the chapter. I do have the test scheduled for Friday. I'm gonna see if I have a sub for Friday. Right now I don't. If I don't, I guess I'll move it back to Tuesday then, the following Tuesday. You guys don't have school next Monday. Okay. So that's the game plan. I'll let you know if it changes. If I do get a sub, hopefully, but I doubt it. Since it's so hard to get. So. Still working? All right, here we go. So for the war effort, the United States, as we're joining, what two events led us into this war again? What two events? The only easy one. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good job. Sinking Lusitania by Gerald Hugos. Good job. So that happened in what year? Lusitania going down under. Chloe? Yeah, good job. Did we join right away? No, we did not. Right? Took us some time. Took us some time. And finally, what was the last straw? Hey. Yeah, good job. Zimmerman note, Zimmerman telegram, however you want to say it. Okay, and we mentioned about those two events already. That's how the United States gets closer, closer, and then jumps into the war. All right, so we had to do our part here at home. Okay, what was that military draft called again? What act was it? Where we had to ramp up our numbers, get people involved. Chloe? No, not yet. No, no, no. Military draft first. Okay. The Selective Service Act? Yeah, good job. Selective Service Act. Good. And we talked all about that and how we needed to increase our numbers because at the time of the war, our military ranked like 17th in the world. It was crazy. We're way behind even Serbia. So we had to really get into the game, right? We had to get in the game. All right, and then that led Chloe to the Espionage and Sedition Acts, right? And then we mentioned about the Committee on Public Information. and how we're pumping out propaganda left and right to try to get people a little bit motivated for the war. Right? Why was this war a little different? Why did we have to put out the espionage and the sedition acts? What was the reason for it, Jason? Yeah, good job, right? So we are a nation of immigrants, and when it comes to German Americans, German immigrants, we had to be careful. Right? We jumped on the Allied power side, so yeah, there could be an internal strife. Anyway, looking back at these agencies and these these acts and these policies, maybe we went too far, right? We talked about this already. Right? Your bell ringer from last week was pretty much an opinion based off what you thought. Maybe the United States just went too far, which a lot of you did say that, right? But at the time, well, that was the only, I guess, option we had. I know it's really hard to say that one, but we had to protect ourselves during the conflict. So, in any case, how are we preparing ourselves? How are we getting our troops across the Atlantic? Our supplies. What was that system called? We're going to use it in World War II as well. Nailed it. Yeah, good job, the convoy system. As we're zigzagging, right? Strength in numbers to try to get our troops and our supplies across the Atlantic. Because the dangers of the U-boats, these wolf packs are out there. We have to be careful. All right. And then at home, the home front, what do we have here at the home front? So propaganda, we mentioned about that. Okay, we talked about the promotion of this patriotism for the people at home. Right? What were these investments that people could buy to help support the war effort, to transition our peacetime production to wartime products? What were those investments called? Thanks, you two. Someone else, though. I appreciate it. Huh? What were they? Battle. Yeah, good job. Liberty bonds. Good, good. So these Liberty bonds, this was this investment, again, showing your patriotism. And that was a way for the government to transition our production to make wartime products. Then after the war, you get your money back along with some interest. So this was a win-win, right? Yeah. So Liberty bonds, great way, again, to promote the government to transition for this war effort, show your patriotism, and get things rolling for the United States. All right. What does the term rationing mean? There's another term here I want you guys to know for the home front. Thanks, you two. Someone else. Oh, what?
When you like save food and stuff so you have it over time.
Awesome, good job, right? So the materials we have, obviously the resources. When you think about food, when you think about metal, when you think about rubber, right? All these different items here, we can protect it, right? Not just throw it out, throw it away. Right? We need to try to ration these sources and send them over for the war effort, so that we have enough in order to try to fight against the German army. Okay. So, in other words, we need to try to ration our food. We need to make sure we have a high supply of food and raw materials that we can win this conflict. So rationing, a big part. All right. So again, that's kind of like the home front here. And what's going to win us this war? It's going to be our sheer production alone. Right. It's going to be our agricultural growth too. Right. So industrial and agricultural. Right. That's what's going to win us this conflict. Again, were we prepared for this war? No, not even close. So we're trying to play a little bit of catch up here. But we can overwhelm Germany with all the resources we can bring in. Right. So World War I and World War II will look a lot like this. Right. And again, that's what's going to win us this conflict. Oh, last one. Who was leading the American Expeditionary Force in World War I? What was that guy's name? He had a nickname. One of your terms from Friday. What was that guy's name? Ariel. Yeah, good job, right? So John Pershing, Blackjack Pershing, good. And again, he was trying to sideline the United States military because he knew we weren't prepared for this kind of warfare, trench warfare with all the new weapons, innovations on the battlefield, right? He was still used to kind of fighting out in the Southwest United States. Again, totally different environment, totally different enemy. So, in other words, he tried to prepare ourselves, but at the same time, hold us back. That caused a lot of arguments with Great Britain and France. Those two countries were saying, hey, we need you right now. And Persia's like, not yet, not yet. And eventually, when we did jump in, right, this overwhelmed Germany, right, the Central Powers. All right, is there any questions? All right, real quick, I'm going to put up the terms for with the Russian Revolution. So to make sure you have those, because I know I was moving pretty quick here towards the end of class. All right, so I'm just going to put them up and then talk a little bit about them, and then we're going to move on with the notes. All right, so like I mentioned, as we're entering the war, another country is leaving, and that is Russia. So here you go. We have Tsar Nicholas II, Rasputin, this weirdo, Bolsheviks, Vladimir Lenin, Russian Revolution, obviously, Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which we'll talk about here, even going into this interwar period. So next chapter, right, as we're talking between the time frame in between the two wars, right, that treaty is going to come up again. And then we got the Soviet Union. So real quick, Tsar Nicholas II, this is this long string of Tsarist Russia, right, this king. Right, so think of Tsar as a king, which we already talked about, but Tsar Nicholas II is the last Tsar of Russia. Right, this is where it all is going to come to an end. So just to kind of let you guys know, give you a timeline of what Russia is going through right around the turn of the 1900s, is that they're not as modernized as these other European countries. They're kind of lacking, they're falling behind. The Industrial Revolution really didn't hit in Russia at this point. So in other words, they weren't prepared for this new modernization, this new future that the rest of Europe's going through, right? They're in the past. All right, one thing here too, did I mention about this? Who did they go to war with right around the start of the 1900s? I must have known. Yeah, Japan, good job. And this war was really just to try to lift the spirits of the Russian people and obviously claim more territory, right? Out in the Pacific area. Right? Maybe build up a navy even more out in the Pacific, right? For Russia. Anyway, how'd this war go for Russia? How'd it go? What, Jason? Yeah, they got humiliated, right? Humiliated. So, in other words, right, Japan was industrializing at a rapid pace. And it is the only Asian country doing this at this moment, at this time. So, Russia thought, you know what, we can boost our morale, boost our nationalism at home if we defeat Japan. And that did not happen. As Japan defeated Russia, well, they're now the laughingstock of Europe. At the time, with social Darwinism, these ideas of expansion and imperialism, right? Asian countries were viewed as inferior to European countries, right? To the United States, right? So as they lost to Japan, Russia was just totally humiliated, embarrassed, laughingstock, like I mentioned. So they've just been really taking a beating here. And again, no modernization. That means the food production is very low, right? Very low. So the people are starving. They're losing wars. They're losing people over costly wars. What are we doing? So the Russian people are a little upset with Tsar Nicholas II. He's not favored whatsoever. Also, he wasn't a great speaker. So usually your leader should be a good speaker, right? Obviously, in order to try to boost the morale of the people. In this case, he didn't like to do it, right? He had stage fright. Some of you guys do your current event presentation. But with Tsar Nicholas II, he'll lose power here to the Bolsheviks, right? He'll lose power here as he's not favored whatsoever, right? Technically, there's two revolutions, but since we're kind of moving here in a quick time base, we're just going to kind of lump it into one Russian revolution. Well, as the Tsar and his family is killed by a firing range, which, interesting enough, this firing range was a little bit difficult to kill some of the people within the family, especially the younger children. Right, the reason for it is because they actually had diamonds within their dresses. And as the firing range was, they're shooting at family. The Romanov dynasty is getting killed off here. Right, the bullets actually kind of bounced off a bit, reflected in a way because the diamonds on her on the dresses of the children, like Anastasia, right? Her dress was kind of like a bulletproof vest, which was interesting. But that only led to these Russian soldiers just firing again and even bayoneting. Oh my gosh, so you can imagine just how difficult and terrible this is. Anyway, real quick, I'll just talk about it now. With the Romanov family, right, there's a lot of rumors out there, conspiracies that Anastasia escaped, and this kind of prompted up a lot of stories, which, musical. But in any case, that she got away. In all reality, she did not. Those are kind of put to rest. In 2007, they did a DNA testing on her remains and found that, okay, she died during this firing range here as a Romanov family was killed. So there's a lot of interesting stories about it, right? A lot of conspiracies as well. Anyway, kind of adds to the lore of this event. All right, next thing here, Rasputin. I'll talk about this guy real quick. Wild, mystic, voodoo magic man. That's what you want to put by his name. Great, right? Tsar Nicholas II, as you can imagine, the early 1900s, well, the scientific revolution was a little bit late to Russia. Again, they were far behind. So when it came to certain medicines, certain diseases that were being spread amongst the family, they wanted to try to prepare the kids. And a few of their kids were actually kind of sick all the time. Their immune systems were very weak. So they actually asked Rasputin, who was way out in the Siberian Peninsula, to help them out. And somehow, some way, maybe it was just luck, or maybe it was just certain circumstances, their kids started to get healed up. And they're like, wait a minute, this guy does have some sort of mystical powers. Anyway, the people in Russia did not like it because they were starving on the streets while Rasputin, this weird, strange man, was living the high life with the Romanov family. So as they're living the high life there, you can imagine people starving are not too happy about it. So what happens? Well, a lot of people try to kill Rasputin because he's living this great life. He was also pretty friendly with the ladies. I'm just going to leave it at that, okay? But this guy was weird and strange. He's way over six. He was about 6'5" or so. And he actually had a lazy eye. So his eyes were kind of strange everywhere, looking around. He really didn't clean himself up too much. He ate like a barbarian, literally. And, well, they tried to kill him. So they actually tried to kill him with poison. It didn't work. So they're like, is this kind of magic man or something? And then they tried to shoot him. One of the bullets actually kind of got reflected and hit him in the forehead. Fell over, came back up, and it's like rose from the dead. They're like, this guy doesn't die. And then they threw him in a frozen river. And then he obviously froze to death and obviously drowned. So that was his fate. Even though they pulled his body out, he was still somewhat breathing. Traveling down like miles down the river, underneath the ice. Somehow survived. Well, he died shortly after. But Rasputin's story is interesting. If you guys want to look at him, go ahead. There's a funny song out there. You guys know that song? Yeah, you want to do the dance for us, Maddie? No? You don't know what it is? Oh, okay. I'll play it for you tomorrow. How's that sound? Or we have some time at the end. All right. Anyway, we'll talk about these other terms here with the lesson. The Russian Revolution. All right, so anyway, like I mentioned, as the United States is getting involved, well, the American Red Cross, these organizations do come around, right? They do. And for women gaining a step up, a leg up here after World War I with the 19th Amendment is where we kind of see it, right? As women are helping aid the men back up off their back, obviously, as they might fall to some ailments or injuries on the battlefield. And the American Red Cross is one of these organizations that see its origin during World War I. And real quick, this will lead to the 19th Amendment. And like I mentioned, shortly after World War I, we'll see this happen. And a lot of it, again, is because women's effort during the war. Right? Again, like I mentioned, there was a lot of progressive movements too for women, right? That helped aid, right, this establishment or these policies, these laws, this amendment here to come about. But World War I was one of these events that really pushed it over the edge here and helped women gain their opportunities, their right to vote. So I can't hear you.
Are we gonna talk about like Claire Martin at all?
What's that?
Are we gonna talk about like Claire Martin?
No, I'm not, but you will talk a lot about that with Mr. Shutt, okay? So that'll be 2 years from now, but anyway, you will talk a lot about that with him. All right, but anyway, there's women in war, okay? I'm gonna move on. Like I said, I kind of talked about this already. I already mentioned about this in the vocab for Friday. All right, so as the Doughboys are getting involved, right? How'd they get the nickname the Doughboys again? You remember? How'd they get that nickname? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, good job, right? So when it came to preserving food, it was difficult in the trenches, obviously. And that was really the only thing they could kind of package. So with dough in the trenches, that's kind of how they got their nickname, because this was the only type of food source they could preserve, right, in this terrible lifestyle in the trenches. All right, but another way is maybe this Mexican-American War. Again, it's kind of thrown up in the air, the stories of where this name came from. But yeah, on the Southwest United States, it's chalky dust that was flying up in the air. As men were obviously sweating, it's very hot down there. This dirt debris would fly on their faces. And yeah, they kind of got the nickname Doughboys because it looked like they were working in a bakery. Also, the uniforms, the United States military, kind of looked like people in a bakery, and like this weird belt, this white belt that would go around along with the uniform. And it looked exactly like what bread makers would wear in a bakery. So, yeah, there's a lot of rumors out there where the nickname Doughboys came from. I just think it's an interesting thing that you guys should know. What was the nickname for German soldiers? Do you remember this from the propaganda pieces? Chase.
Huns.
Huns, yeah, good job, Huns. So just to give you guys an idea, you might see that on the text, you might. All right, again, we already talked about this. Are we good to go? Can we move on? Yeah? Okay. So there's a good look at the Doughboys. Oh, look at this. All right, so there's the uniform of the Doughboys. Again, is that gonna really protect you from bullets? No. Is that gonna protect you from any type of weapons that you see on the battlefield in World War One? No. So America's gonna have to adjust a lot, right? They're gonna have to really look at this conflict and say, we gotta keep up with the times. And after World War One, we kind of do, right? It's not until really after World War Two, we start to innovate a lot more. And really focus on staying that number one power in the world, right? When it comes to innovation, when it comes to constantly research and develop new weapons to seek that advantage on the battlefield. But as you can see, this uniform here, that's not going to really protect me in trench warfare. Again, you can kind of compare it to other countries, sure, but we were really, really far behind. Right? It's not even close. All right, so like I mentioned, as the United States is moving into this war, okay, as we're entering the conflict on the Allied power side, Russia is leaving, right? Again, the idea for Tsar Nicholas II is that, boy, this is a really problematic time for Russia as an empire. They really entered the war just because they needed to boost nationalism. They had to boost their national pride. Right? As the people were starving, as they lost that war to Japan, right? As World War One kicks off, Russia's like, you know what? Here's our ability. If we win this war, guess what? We're going to have resources. We're going to claim territory. The people's national pride of Russia is going to be up, right? And typically during a conflict like this, the whole country unites. Does that make sense? So with that being said, he just threw Russia into this war really just to try to boost nationalism and to boost his favorability. So Tsar Nicholas II, this wasn't the greatest idea. Is Russia prepared for this war? No, they're way, way far behind. Right, they didn't go through that industrial revolution like the other European countries, like the United States. I know we weren't prepared, but Russia, not even close. So as they're fighting that Eastern Front against Germany, right, a lot of their men are retreating. A lot of their men are running, literally running from the front lines because they don't even have food there. Right? A lot of the Tsar, right, the Tsar family, and a lot of the oligarchs, okay, within Russia were taking a lot of the resources. And the peasants, right, the lower classes, they weren't really seeing any type of benefit from Tsarist Russia. So in other words, they're over the war. They're over it. Okay, and there's a lot of sources out there. There's a lot of information, evidence detailing about the Russian soldiers just fleeing the front lines. Right. Some of them at the start of the war actually thought that this was a way for them to get food. Right. Believe it or not, they're going to risk fighting in the trenches just because, like, you know what, I'm going to get some sort of food from the government, something. Right now, I'm getting nothing, right? And they quickly realized that didn't happen. So again, a lot of them fled, a lot of them ran off, right? So you got to imagine, as Russia's leaving the conflict because they're going through this Russian Revolution, while Germany, they no longer have to fight a two-front war. So you got to imagine the Central Powers kind of get a second breath, right? They realize that, hey, now we can actually focus all of our attention on the Western Front. Here's our chance. But again, the United States joins in, so it's not like they have really any room here for mistake. Now, let's face it, right? A lot of the German soldiers have been fighting for a long time. Now they got to walk from one end of Europe to the other, right? And as they're doing that, you got to imagine, right? These German soldiers are walking through their homeland, aren't they? Yeah. You think they want to go home? Yeah, right. So as they're moving from the Eastern Front to the West, a lot of the German soldiers said, enough's enough. I'm done with this. Right? I'm going home. So that Western Front for Germany really didn't pick up too much. Right? They did, sure, but a lot of the soldiers just kind of went home. Right? They decided just to desert the front lines. They didn't think this war was really achievable at this point, and they're over it. All right, so like I mentioned with Tsar Nicholas II, the Romanov dynasty, the Romanov family here, Tsarist Russia comes to an end. right? And the Bolsheviks, which is the Communist Party of Russia, right? They viewed these ideas from Marx and Engels and said, hey, why don't we create a state that focuses on this? Which this is where the Soviet Union comes into play. All right, so Vladimir Lenin, here's a picture of Vladimir Lenin here, right? He's the one who's going to lead this Bolshevik revolution in Russia. Right? I get it, technically there's two revolutions, but we're just going to kind of lump them together to show how the Soviet Union comes into play. Right, so Lenin actually, listen to this, crazy enough. Lenin was actually a prisoner in Germany during the war, because he was starting these radical ideas, these radical movements of communism in Germany. So guess what they did? They put him in jail for the length of the war here. And all of a sudden here, as it gets to 1917, Germany actually uses this man as a weapon, right? They do. They say, hey, what better way to get Russia out of the war as we can just release this madman here into Russia. They'll start this communist revolution, and guess what? They'll remove themselves. So Germany actually pushes Vladimir Lenin over across Russian border. They travel him in by train, and then boom, Russian Revolution happened. So it was kind of strategically planned by Germany to release this man, to start this revolution, to pull Russia out of the war. And guess what? It worked. It worked, right? Is this going to lead to a lot of trouble here for Germany down the line? Yeah, well, I mean, there's going to be still tensions between the two powers, obviously in World War II. But Lenin leads a revolution, and we already talked about it. The Romanov family's killed. Oh, it's terrible, terrible stories and events there. But Russia turns into the Soviet Union. Okay. So, in other words, the Soviet Union creates the first communistic state. And, well, this is going to lead to a lot of troubling times for, well, the rest of Western Europe, as you got a communist power, right, that threatens democracy, threatens everything our government stands for. So, again, you can see the concerns. All right, real quick, the last thing I want to mention was the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Okay, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, real quick, write this down if you didn't. All right, this solidifies the Eastern Front. Okay, this says, hey, you know what, Russia, you left the war. This land that you had that was very close to Germany, it's gone. It's gone. Okay, and Germany is going to, issue this line that pushes Russia far, far back. Okay, so in other words, Russia loses a lot of land in Eastern Europe, right? A ton of land. That which is going to create many of these Eastern European countries. One being Ukraine. Ooh, okay. So you kind of see the timeline here, right? You can see how this fits into current events. Which Avery, Mina, there you go. Look at that. All right. So I know Ukraine's history is a lot different than just this land here that was just pushed back. But in any case, you can kind of see in this leading into World War I where this timeline, is. But with that being said, Russia's not going to like this at all. And here in the future, right, we're going to see them try to gobble back this land up, right? They're going to try to get this land back under Russian control, which in World War II they do. Right? They hold it all the way through the Cold War. And just recently, since the 1990s, that line is getting backed up, where you see these Eastern European countries forming again. Right? So, in other words, Eastern Europe's just constant back and forth under Russian control. Anyway, that treaty is going to kind of keep pace, right? Or not really, but just raise tensions more with the Soviet Union and eventually Germany here, leading into World War II. All right, so there's Rasputin, the strange voodoo magic man. Right, there's a lot of stories about that guy. Oof, some that you probably don't want to hear. Anyway, there's the Romanov family. Okay, so as you can imagine, the Tsarist Russia just gets put to an end here because of this Bolshevik revolution, right? Because of this Russian revolution that occurs and brings communism to the Soviet Union, which we'll mention is going to be a threat to the rest of these democratic nations, these democratic countries. And this is going to bring on the Red Scare. So after World War I, we already talked about it with the Espionage and Sedition Acts, okay? Germany was the enemy. But after World War I, now all of a sudden we need a new enemy, and that's going to be communism, where these ideas of this anarchical society, right, where everybody's equal across the board here, that brings down the ideas of capitalism and the foundations of liberties and freedoms as the government controls everything, right? This is going to be the next fear, right? The next Red Scare in America. All right, that's all I got here. Is there any questions? of the Russian Revolution. I know I lumped the two together, I get that, but it just makes more sense here as we are limited in time. Right, just know that Vladimir Lenin takes over, right? He takes over here, there he is, in Russia. And you'll see the Soviet Union emerge. So make sure you know through this Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union, USSR, right, is going to be created. Right, St. Petersburg, you guys remember that city? The city built on bones, the window to the west, is now going to be known as Leningrad. Okay, Vladimir Lenin, he dies in 1924, and this is going to lead, right, a lot of these leaders in the Soviet Union to fight for this power. And then we'll see Stalin come into play. Believe it or not, Vladimir Lenin's body is entombed in a red square, which is pretty neat, I guess. Kind of freaky, right? But people visit his body all the time, right? Obviously, they close it up to make sure that you just can't go in there day in and day out. But in certain times, right, they actually show his body for the Russian people to kind of go and see. So tourists, and they hold him in this red square in Russia, which is neat. It's interesting. So if you guys want to look into that a little bit more, do it. I see his body's kind of strange. Obviously, it's been a long time, but the tomb is interesting. Like it's just shows Russian history and how they really showed this guy, kind of like George Washington in a way. That's how they try to compare it, which a little different, obviously, but that's how they try to explain it. All right, any questions, guys? So Russia's out, all right? They go through this communist revolution, the Soviet Union begins, and well, it's going to create some even more sparks in the future.